Let me say, Her Ladyship, thank you for hosting us here. As usual, you look younger than your age. I want to say, for some of us, it's an honor to also contribute to what has already been laid here. And I'm ever so grateful. I'm very grateful to see my mentor and my father here, Uncle Sam Okujeto. Please put your hand together for him for me. Most of us, as young men who have come from his background, took a lot of inspiration from him. And I'm always privileged to say this publicly, because you are like my father of blessed memory. Of course you are. My presentation here is going to be very brief. And Your Ladyship, I wondered how I can put together a message in 15 minutes as a preacher. Unfortunately for me, I train as an economist and specialize in international relations, so I don't just preach. I'm also an academic and intellectual. And so I was very mindful in putting together a 15 minutes message. But let me attempt to bullet point it, and I pray it works. My presentation really is on the 1992 Constitutional Review, and I gave it a very interesting introduction here. This brief presentation is aimed at assessing the impact of the winner-takes-all politics in some African countries, using my nation, Ghana's 1992 Constitution as a case study. The politics of winner-takes-all in Ghana has made elections become do-and-die affairs, because the political party which wins an election will automatically control every sector of the economy. This unfortunate system includes issues of appointment and excessive power by the president. And of course, that excludes other political parties and members in the opposition in governance, and that gives our presidency or the executive an excessive power. So here are my major points here. Major points for constitutional review. Ghana has long been ruled by the 1992 Constituency, which serves as the country's supreme law. It was enacted following an extended period of military rule and political changes. The Constitution strives to promote democratic governance, protect human rights, and accomplish national progress. But it is obvious that after more than 30 years, the Constitution has to be reviewed and amended if we wish to improve governance and promote inclusivity. Your Ladyship, gender remains a significant issue in Ghana. And I'm happy you are chairing us, but if you can say even on the high table, you are the only lady there. You are in the minority. So your gender remains a significant issue in Ghana, particularly in political representation and decision making. Although the Constitution guarantees equal rights and opportunity for all, women are significantly underrepresented in politics and in leadership. Women make up more than 50%, I think we all know this very well, of the population of most African countries. In order to attain equity and equality of opportunity for women, there is the need for uniform representation of women in all branches of government. And I dare say that the Constitution should be reviewed to incorporate gender sensitivity policies that will ensure women participation in decision-making and equal representation in all sectors of our society and our community. Ghana can emulate other African countries. And Ladyship, I've been to Rwanda and a few countries in Africa, including South Africa, and I think they are doing much better than we are doing here in Ghana. So we have them to at least learn from, and clear-cut provision to increase women representation in public offices. Something that I think I would strongly recommend, that if that was the only thing we're living here with, that we should be able to give room to ladies. And also, I also advocate that the ladies themselves should support the ladies. But there's one problem in Ghana that I've noticed. The ladies don't vote for the ladies. Women do not really vote for a woman. Your leadership, the excessive powers of the president is a main point of contention in the 1992 Constitution. The president has extensive executive authority, including the right to dissolve parliament, appoint and remove public officials, and make important decisions without consulting the branches of the government. And that's limiting checks and balances. I think as O-level students, when we read government, we read about the arms of government, and we read about the checks and balances, read about the separation of powers. And of course, with this kind of powers invested into a president, it limits the checks and balances. This power concentration threatens democracy and effective government. The Constitution needs to be updated to reduce the president's authority while enhancing the function of the parliament and other institutions. Your leadership, religion, and I stand here today as a cleric. Religion is highly valued in Ghanaian society, and the Constitution guarantees both religious freedom and the separation of church and state. Nonetheless, there are worries that intolerance and prejudice are occasionally justified by religion. To guarantee that religious freedom is safeguarded while prohibiting the use of religion as a tool of discrimination, the Constitution has to be modified to create the balance. A value is to be placed on a religious heritage. And let me also dare to say that I am getting very concerned about the number of attention that are given to politicians whose positions are very transient, but we don't seem to value our religious leaders. I've had a very unfortunate situation by sitting at the VVIP and you see a young politician say that, no, these places are for politicians. And maybe the kind of people they are talking to are people who could have been their fathers, who are men who, but for them, Ghana would have been torn into pieces. So I think some of these things, sensitively, we must look at it not to take the religious leadership for granted, but for the religious leadership, we have no nation. We need to applaud Christians and Muslims alike. And if you can, please clap for them on my behalf. So it's highly valued. And of course, while prohibiting this, we also want to put on record that getting a very good religious setup will help our nation to be disciplined and also to stay in focus. Of course, there's no much time to go into that, but I have a separate paper that I'll be handing over to the chairperson after this, because I think I am a little bit worried about how we have sidelined the religious leadership. And think about this before I even continue. When you go to an occasion, His Excellency will be acknowledged. Even MCs and DCs will be acknowledged. And sometimes in our messages, we forget to acknowledge the religious leadership. But when we die, they bury us. And when we're in trouble, we call on them. I think this wrong must be corrected. And of course, this is the time that we take everything into consideration. Your leadership, decentralization is a crucial component of governance and development. And although the 1992 Constitution calls for decentralization and creation of district assemblies, there are worries that the current setup is inefficient. There are requests for the Constitution to be amended in order to boost local government role and increase district assemblies' ability to support growth and service provision. Your leadership, good governance and cooperation are still major issues in Ghana. Although the Constitution calls for transparency, accountability, and the rule of law, these ideals are not only implemented in reality. There are worries that political favoritism and nepotism undermine the merit-based hiring practices and equal access to opportunities because corruption is still entrenched in our society, and we cannot hide from that. It is necessary to review the Constitution in order to reinforce anti-corruption policies, improve accountability and transparency, and support good governance practices. Your leadership, ladies and gentlemen, national development planning is another area that Ghana has to be examined and modified. There are worries that the Constitution provision for the creation of a thorough national development plan has not been effectively carried out. To make sure that national development planning is integrated into all facets of governance, and that the plan is in line with the nation's long-term development vision, the Constitution has to be reviewed in this area. Ultimately, the Ghanaian 1992 Constitution has been instrumental in fostering prosperity, democracy, and human rights. There is a need to investigate and make changes in a number of areas in order to improve governance, promote inclusivity, and advance national development. A comprehensive review of the Constitution is necessary to address issues including women's rights, as I said earlier. The present executive power, religion, decentralization, good administration, corruption, and national development planning. A view of this nature will ensure that when we do this review, that the Constitution is still applicable and responsive to Ghanaians' needs and aspirations. In conclusion, Madam Chair, I have some bullet points here, and I've put it as my conclusion summary. The 1992 Constitution emerged out of a revolutionary and a military leadership. And that is what the Fourth Republic has used. We have had President John Rawlings, President John Agyekum Kufuor, President John Evans Atta Mills, President John Dramani Mahama, and currently President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. In brief, and moving forward, our Constitution must lay a good foundation for a solid and practical way of maintaining our ongoing democratic dispensation. Thus, one, it must promote and empower the arms of government, that is the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. Two, it must encourage and strengthen separation of powers. Three, it must advocate for appropriate checks and balances for our governance system in all aspects of our democratic system. And four, it must be sensitive to gender, children, and disabilities. Five, also, our Constitution must be crafted to accommodate and be sensitive to the traditional and religious heritage of us as a people. Your Ladyship, our continuous delay in reviewing and rectifying the current Constitution is a dent on our ailing democracy. And I dare say that it cannot be overly emphasized that the excessive powers of the executive undermines the strength of all the other organs. Finally, I strongly recommend that as an emerging economy and democracy, we reconsider the tenure of 6 years instead of the 4 years. That will give space and time to put structures in place. Your Ladyship, in view of the 1992 Constitution, which is the current legal instrument for Ghana's democracy rule, it is dated, and I want to say this, that a lot of issues that must be addressed will have to be addressed properly. One of that issue that should be addressed is that a lot of you who are very intelligent, very smart, and still able should not be kept at home. And I said that's with you here and with Uncle Sam Okudzeto here, that even though you are past 70, your brains, your intelligence, your capacity, and your availability Now, as I put on my economics cap, we wonder where our GDP is in a mess. Because Sam Okudzeto is still on payroll. if he's on retirement. Gloria Akufo, former Mama Sofa Akufo, former Chief Justice, still on payroll. And if from the way you can see her, she's like a typical Ghana woman called Yomo Beggar. So we should preserve our economy and preserve our GDP. And I think, Uncle Sam, you both agree with me that in the UK where I studied at the London School of Economics. And I also studied at Budapest University of Economic Sciences. And so if I look at the constitution in Hungary and the constitution in the UK, and having had a chance to travel around the world a little, looking at how Americans handle the intellectuals, I think some of you have been retired too early, unless you want to go and rest. But as you can tell, our mama here is not ready to go and rest at all. So I think the Constitution should make room for that. And also, finally, I want to say that as a people, we should put God first in all we do. 15 seconds, 15 minutes, 15 days is not enough to put this together. God bless you.